Thank you for joining us here today. We've called this media conference to share a significant update on the case of the Otonabee River Man. Probably most in this room may not even recall that far back. This case dates back over 36 years. And it's been an open cold case with the Peterborough Police Service for over 3 decades. In fact, since July of 1988, when recreational divers found a human skull in the Otonabee River. This case has never been forgotten by our organization and has had fresh eyes on it throughout the years. Each looking at it from a new perspective, each looking at it from a new opportunity to use new and emerging technology and investigating techniques that could help shed light on who the Otonabee River Man was. Anything, quite frankly, that would help us identify a starting place from which to understand what may have led to the death of this individual. Anything that might help shed light and provide us with information that we can provide to their loved ones. Throughout the years, learning the identity of this person has been a priority for this organization and paramount to moving the investigation forward. Various methods of attempting to make that identification have been used, but to no avail. So before we go any further, we're going to show you a video that we'll be posting to our YouTube channels, our websites, our social media accounts to spread the news as far and wide as we can. We'll do that later today so that we have an opportunity to provide you with information now that you can use. We also hope that through your networks, you will share it widely. The goal of this video is to create conversation around this case and hope that it can ultimately be solved. And the person who's responsible for this crime can be brought before the courts for justice. Once the video is played, we'll go through a bit more of the case and the next steps.
I'm Detective Sergeant Josh McGrath of the Peterborough Police Service Criminal Investigation Bureau. I'm walking here along the Otonabee River at Lock and McKellar Street in the city of Peterborough, Ontario. At this site on July 10, 1988, recreational divers were exploring the area when they located an intact human skull approximately 130 feet offshore. Once recovered from the water, a postmortem examination was conducted and it revealed that this was an adult male who had in fact been the victim of a homicide. Extensive air and underwater searches were conducted, however the remainder of the body has never been found. The discovery of the skull, known only as the Otonabee River Man, has never been forgotten and has remained a true mystery. Over the past 3 decades, the Peterborough Police Service has used various investigative methods to identify the remains. However, despite these efforts, the identity remained unknown until now. The victim has now been identified as Gerald Durocher. He was born in November 1949, and at the time of his death, he would have been 38 years old. So, just how were the police able to make the identification? Beginning in October of 2021, the Peterborough Police Service worked in partnership with a Texas-based company called Othram in hopes that advanced DNA testing and forensic genetic genealogy could assist in the identification of the victim. Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile, which was then used by their investigative genealogy team in conjunction with the forensic genetic genealogy to produce new investigative leads. Using these investigative leads, detectives with the Peterborough Police Service were able to identify potential relatives, and confirmatory DNA testing was completed by the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, resulting in the positive identification of Gerald Durocher. Learning the identity of the Otonabee River Man has always been the first step in this investigation, and now investigators are committed to determining what happened to Gerald and who was responsible for his death. Although we have learned that Gerald was residing in the Ottawa area, we know that he lived a lifestyle that saw him visit many places. Gerald had connections throughout the province of Ontario, and in the months leading up to his death, he is believed to have frequented the Vendome Hotel, which is located at the intersection of Somerset and Rochester Streets in Ottawa. We are also aware that Durocher had ties to cities and towns outside of Ontario, including central British Columbia. The Peterborough Police Service is committed to solving this homicide and bringing closure to the victim's family. To do so, we are reaching out to the community. We believe that someone out there has knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Gerald's death. Any information about Gerald's family, his friends, or his whereabouts in the 1980s is valuable and will assist the Peterborough Police Service in solving this homicide investigation.
I'm Detective Constable Keith Calder from Peterborough, Northumberland Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers has generously offered a $5,000 reward for anyone who has information leading to an arrest in this case. Please submit a tip to stopcrimehere.ca or call 1-800-222-TIPS. If you have any information leading to arrest, you will never have to testify in court and you may be eligible for the cash reward.
If you or anyone you know has any information about this investigation, we are urging you to contact us. Thank you for helping the Peterborough Police Service solve the cold case of the Otonabee River Man.
So at this particular point, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Sergeant Josh McGrath here to provide you with a bit of an understanding of an overview of the case as we knew it, and of course the steps that have been taken to get us to where we are right now as explained here in the video. And I just want to thank our Detective Sergeant here because quite frankly it was him that took the initiative to send this particular this skull and continue up on the investigation that got us to where we are today. So, Josh?
Thank you, Chief. As mentioned, this case has not been forgotten by the Peterborough Police Service, the Criminal Investigation Unit, or the community. Gerald Durocher would have been 38 years old at the time of his death in the late 1980s. Now that we know who the victim is, what we need to know is the events and the circumstances that led to his death. What we do know is that Gerald led a lifestyle that led him to many different places in Canada, as far as Ottawa and then the interior BC. At this point, there are no known ties to the Peterborough community. Over the past 3 decades of investigation, our service has completed multiple steps in an attempt to confirm the identity of the remains that were found. These included DNA testing and elimination through a partnership with Othram and the Ontario Forensic Pathology Service, exhaustive investigations into missing persons and with assistance of the Missing Person Data Bank. We've collaborated with multiple police services across the country. We have completed media releases, including the artistic renderings that was released in 2014. We've interviewed persons associated to Gerald and the investigation. We followed up on numerous investigative steps and leads. As referenced in the video, in 2021, the Peterborough Police Service submitted a sample of the remains to a Texas-based company called Othram. Othram scientists provided detectives with a comprehensive DNA profile, which was then used by their investigative genealogy team to produce new investigative leads. With those new leads, detectives with the Peterborough Police Service were able to identify likely relatives of the victim and confirmatory DNA testing was performed, which was positively able to identify the remains of the Otonabee River Man. From Othram, Michael Vogan has been generous enough to join us today and is open to any questions at the conclusion of this media conference. We are hoping that the video and information about this case will be shared widely. At this point, there's been so many years that have elapsed since the found remains and the identity of Gerald. What we are asking for is that if anybody out there knows any information or knows anybody with information about Gerald, about his associates, about some of the places that he may have frequented, to please contact the Peterborough Police. Even the smallest bit of information may be what we need to keep this investigation moving forwards. We're extremely thankful to the Peterborough Northumberland Crime Stoppers for offering a $5,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest in this matter. Anyone with information is urged to either call Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-TIPS or online at stopcrimehere.ca, or you can speak to the investigative team directly at 705-876-1122, extension 555. I thank you for any information that you're able to provide us.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Chief.
So I also want to acknowledge that for 3 decades, a number of detectives have worked on this case. Piecing together information, reaching out to conduct interviews. We've traveled to British Columbia to conduct interviews with surviving family members. We've connected with other police services, and we've been meeting with family throughout the country where we could find them to bring us to where we are today. They've approached this case, these detectives have approached this case with determination and respect for these found remains and the person ultimately who had lost their life. In all cases, they conducted themselves with utmost professionalism. It's not always easy reaching into the past, but this is an example of tireless efforts that the police make and take behind the scenes each and every day. Every family deserves to know what happened to their loved one. We've made it an important step forward in this and with this breakthrough. We know who he is. We know what happened. We have yet to discover why it happened and, of course, who is responsible. If there is any doubt about our resolve, let me be clear in this, and let this be a clear indication that our resolve has not and will not waver. Thank you again for joining us here today. It was important that we connect with you and through you to the larger community so that we can pass this information on to as many people as possible. Somebody out there has the answers we need. It's time to put Gerald back with his family for some closure. We'll open the floor to any questions.
Yes, sir.
Was it just his skull that was found, or
Yes, at the time of his discovery, it was just his skull and a portion of the upper vertebrae. No other remains have ever been found.
and how were you able to determine it was a homicide?
So based on the coroner's report at the time, they could indicate that his head had been dismembered by a sharp-edged object, and there was no other natural cause of death that we could attribute.
At this point, do you know if his head was removed before or after?
We don't know that.
I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but when was the skull sent to the lab in Texas?
So in October of 2021, we first started correspondence with them, and then through collaboration determined that they were a right fit to assist us in the investigation. And then from that time through 2022, samples were sent to them, and they worked on their genealogical profile and then provided it back to us in 2023.
I'm going to jump on that too, and just because I know that we have representatives here from Othram online with us from Texas, and really this is an example of how technology continues to develop and emerge. Sometimes not even within the law enforcement world, but can be applied to law enforcement to allow us to make important progress in investigations like this. Cold cases are just that. They're cold, but they are never closed. And this is a clear example of what that technology, what that resolve, what those resources can do to help us continue to move forward on these investigations. So it's really thanks to Josh here for taking that initiative to send that skull down, and then really thanks to Michael and his team in Texas for being able to put this together for us. Thanks.
So what I can say is the families asked for privacy this time. They've all been very cooperative with police, and we've spoken with them all. The information that they have provided us so far, we are following up with. However, the circumstances surrounding all the information were not fully able to divulge. But some of the locations and the circumstances that we do know did come from the family.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to explain more about how the skull was used to create a DNA profile and then like identify who he is through that?
I'd love to defer to the expert if he's available there.
Where do the genealogical database?
So there's several genealogical databases that we have access to when we're working with law enforcement on these cases. We have our own database. It's called DNA Solves. There's Family Tree DNA, and then there's GEDmatch. All these databases allow for people to upload their DNA or do a consumer DNA test and then opt in for law enforcement assistance. So once they opt in, their DNA profile is available for comparison to the profiles that we build from this forensic evidence. And so in the course of this investigation, we found many distant matches. And then our job was ultimately to narrow down, exclude big portions of these family trees until we got much more closer to the direct family from which Gerald descended from.
Okay, when you're talking about the consumer one, so that's like things like 23andMe and like Ancestry.ca, that sort of thing?
So if you do a 23andMe test, the database, we do not access 23andMe or Ancestry. The only databases that allow for access for this type of analysis are Family Tree DNA, GEDmatch, and DNA Solves. But certainly if you're a consumer and you've done a 23andMe test, you can take that data and then upload it to any of those databases that I mentioned and allow for you to assist in these investigations.
Or what you know so far about Gerald?
Yes. So what we do know about Gerald is he lived a lifestyle towards his later years in life that was fairly transient. As mentioned previously, he's been associated places in Ottawa and as far west as BC. So it's safe to assume that he has traveled the country. What we don't know is many of his associates or the circumstances that led up to and prior to his death. And that's why we're invited you all here today. We're trying to get this messaging out. If there is anyone out there with any little bit of information, Those little bits of information that we may not know add up to a lot for us and keeps this investigation moving. So that's very important to us.
Mm-hmm.